Kendrick Lamar Duckworth was born on June 17, 1987 to a working-class family in Compton, California, a city infamous for its gangs and violent crime. Despite Kendrick describing his home life as pretty stable, courtesy of his parents' efforts to make sure he was always well-fed and protected, they couldn't cover everything. This was Compton, California.
The people loot a bakery in Compton, causing tens of thousands of dollars in losses.
News out of Compton of a deadly shooting investigation.
Happened 4 weeks ago. 4 men walked into a smoke shop in Compton, attempted to commit an armed robbery. A security guard pulled his gun out, and the shootout began.
Instances of violence, drug usage, and even death were common occurrences in the city. Occurrences that Kendrick has made an effort to describe, one of the most notable being his witnessing of his first murder at the age of 5, right outside his house complex.
Do I have this right? You saw your first murder when you were 5 years old?
Yes, sir.
What happened?
It was outside my apartment unit. A guy was out there serving his narcotics, and somebody rolled up and with a shotgun blew his chest out. We're kids playing in this apartment unit, riding our bikes or whatnot, so immediately it done something to me right then and there to let me know that this is not only something that I'm looking at, but it's something that maybe I have to get used to.
Despite all of that, Kendrick knew not to participate in the chaos that ravaged the streets. His family expected greatness from him, especially in his talented writings. Danger surrounded Compton, and Kendrick was just one of the many people living there. He could have fallen a victim to street life. He could have gone down a completely different path, never becoming the person that he is today. But he didn't. He made it out through music. His creation of it. It served as his means to create in a city that only seemed to be able to destroy. It served as the key to Kendrick's next chapter, the life of an artist. Kendrick's first two major projects, Section 80 and Good Kid, Mad City, propelled his career forward. They opened the door for Kendrick, but not in a fully positive way. To Pimp A Butterfly takes place after Kendrick's rise to fame to status and popularity, and it's with this newfound fame where the issues begin. In this track, Kendrick describes his young self. He was ambitious, confident, and had no other goal than to be the best. He knew he was on the come up and had visions of his bag. He had dreams of money, splurging it all on women, cars, and other deathless luxury. This is meant to capture the trap of the industry. Due to improper education on the concept of money, many young black artists have no idea how to handle it once it comes. However, this isn't fully the fault of the individual. In the second verse, the song is sung from the perspective of Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is meant to resemble American capitalism, the embodiment of fortune. Sam lures these black artists in, prompting them to waste more and more of their newly earned money. He wants them to forget their goals and ambitions, and give in to the monopoly. But Kendrick is smart enough not to throw everything away, and is able to escape the approaching taxman who is coming to send them back from whence he came. This song has two meanings, one being literal and the other being metaphorical. The literal meaning is the face value of the song. A woman is arguing with Kendrick because he can't provide her with enough material. The woman wants more and more from him, but offers nothing in return. She threatens that she'll just go to one of her side men if he doesn't comply. Kendrick responds by telling her that
this dick ain't free,
and that he refuses to be milked for material goods. This song ends with the woman mentioning her uncle, Sam, and how she's gonna call him to beat Kendrick up. The metaphorical meaning has the same underlying message, just with a switch in characters. The woman represents the industry, while her uncle, Sam, represents, well, In this song, Kendrick describes how the industry operates. To be a part of the industry means to meet certain standards, certain requirements. To be fully dedicated into making as much money as possible, no matter what. This is the capitalist ideal, and applies especially worse to creators who are black. Changes are expected from certain creators so that they can reach a broader audience. Kendrick's views from his life in Compton were expected to alter so that they could reach more people, so that they can make more money. The industry, scared of Kendrick's strong denial of their advances, threatens to send Uncle Sam into the mix. If Kendrick doesn't comply, Uncle Sam will simply make his career no more.
I got a bone to pick.
Kendrick returns to Compton, which is a theme we'll see later in the album. King Kunta is meant to have 4 different interpretations. Kendrick boasting about how he's the best, him calling out other rappers for approaching his throne, the temptation that comes with being at the top, and the fact that he's a black man in America. The 2 points that I'll be explaining best flow with the overarching theme of the album, his boasting and him being black. Coming off the 2 previous tracks, it's established that the industry is out to get Kendrick and other artists alike. But with his boasting, Kendrick rebels against the system. He knows he's the best at his craft and refuses to be pimped. Kendrick's aware of the threat from the industry, but he's not scared. He has faith in himself, knowing that his ability to create is greater than their ability to take. Going back to the song for a second, both the title and meaning serve as reference to Kunta Kinte. Kunta is a fictional character, a slave set in America during the 18th century. Kunta is known for his rebellious nature, making multiple attempts at escape and refusing to change the name that he was born with. Severely punished, having his legs cut off so that he could never try to escape again. This story is meant to symbolize the situation that Kendrick is put in. The industry wants to cut him off now that he stands at the top of the game. The song was especially rebellious, reminiscent of Kunta's actions. It's meant to send a message of strength, of deniance. But Kendrick is only human. Even rebels mess up, and Kendrick's mistakes are especially visible in the events of the next song. To be institutionalized means to be so accustomed to something that you view it as a norm. Kendrick's lived in Compton the majority of his life and is aware on how it affects his worldviews. Is it really a good idea to hold resentful views of the rich now that those are your peers? A better question can be pulled from this same concept. Can I still have the same views I had as a kid in Compton, despite making it out? This question is one of hindsight. After Kendrick makes it big, it's revealed that he still held on to some of these views from Compton, even the questionable ones. It's said that he used his fame and influence to do some very questionable things, specifically to have sex with women. Despite this being a very weird fact in the story, it's quite important in the context given. Just trust me, bro. Throughout the entirety of the album, a poem is recited in specific songs. This poem holds a lot of weight and sets the timeline for the album. In the start of These Walls, the very beginning of the poem is recited. I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same. This was the setup for Kendrick's questionable actions with his newfound fame. Kendrick had no issue with using his status to get into the panties of another woman, a woman whose man was behind bars. But the man of this woman was a murderer, the killer of one of Kendrick's childhood friends. And then the poem is further deepened towards the end of the song. Abusing my power, full of resentment that turned into a deep depression. Found myself screaming in a hotel room. Kendrick's misuse of his fame and influence led to a deep disappointment in himself. Not only had he used his power to solicit the woman, but his intentions were incredibly vile. He only wanted to get into this woman's walls to get revenge on the murder of his friend, who was behind prison walls. The disappointment for himself festers and turns into a deep depression. You is a view on Kendrick's lowest moments. In this song, he's talking to himself, more rather yelling at himself for the mistakes he's made. It's seen in previous songs that Kendrick knows his greatness, but it's here that we see how cheap he really feels. He's shattered by the problems of his new life. He's still a kid from Compton, but no longer lives there. He can't give back to everyone who lives there, nor could he bring everyone up with him. Death is still rampant. There's tens of thousands of Kendricks out there who aren't gonna make it out because of circumstances they can't control. Some kids are just doomed to stay there their entire lives, while Kendrick is the one who made it out. The second half of the song has a dramatic shift in tone. Despite the entire song being Kendrick speaking to himself, this half has a lot more impact in my opinion. Kendrick is drunk. Very drunk. Him being drunk is meant to resemble the issue of people using alcohol as a crutch in tough times. Kendrick's usage and overconsumption is meant to further solidify his pain. He cries on his mistakes, the mistakes that cut him up mentally. Later on in the song, Kendrick tells us a story that still haunts him to this day. One day, Kendrick had promised to take care of his best friend's little brother, but he couldn't because he had to go on tour. With Kendrick gone, the little brother gets shot and is sent to the hospital. Because of Kendrick's tight schedule, he couldn't come down to visit him at the hospital, but the best he could do was giving a FaceTime call. The younger brother dies after a failed surgery. Now it's safe to assume Kendrick has a multitude of experiences just like this, with all of them holding similar impacts on his mental state. This song contains a lot of concepts with little examples. The concept of abandonment, the concept of guilt, the concept of superiority, and the concept of depression. This is a track meant to leave the listener thinking, what else could have possibly happened? The lack of specifics convey that this isn't the only event that's left him so scarred. Alright, arguably Kendrick's most popular song, takes a wide turn from this depression. To look past one's struggles and focus on yourself, your family, and the things you love is how situations are bettered. There's hope for all, for everyone to be alright. But being alright will never stop the industry. Tales of family coverage and riches beyond his wildest dreams are promised to Kendrick as long as he signs a contract. The one prompting Kendrick to sign this contract being none other than Lucy, or Lucifer. In short, Lucy wants Kendrick to sign himself away. Horrified, Kendrick runs away, which is a continuation of the poem mentioned earlier. I didn't want to self-destruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me, so I went running for answers, until I came home. Home. Home has multiple meanings. It's his home in Compton. It's his African heritage. It's who he is as an individual, or all of them. Kendrick returns to Compton once again in this song. Unlike himself in King Kunta, however, Kendrick is much more reflective in this track. He saw that he had lost touch with his roots. He knew nothing of Compton now and was more lost than ever. He decides to visit Africa, and it's there he sees where he went wrong. He realizes that he was living in a fake world, and how he should return to all three senses of home. In the last few tracks of the album, I believe Kendrick returns to the final sense of home, his old self. Kendrick speaks on the politics of America and how distorted the landscape has become. The hood may be his home, but politics are still part of his identity. Kendrick is quite educated on the state of the world, especially in America. He knows how the system is meant to keep people impoverished, to keep his people down. He's no longer afraid to speak on this issue, reminiscent of himself in older songs, a piece of himself returning. Kendrick speaks about religion and the virtues of humility and generosity. A homeless man asks Kendrick for $1, yet Kendrick refuses to give it to him despite the man's pleading. In fact, Kendrick becomes quite angry at the man, exclaiming how it's stupid that people ask for things that aren't theirs. He makes excuses to himself as to why he shouldn't give the man the $1. He smells of alcohol, he's bummy, and he'd probably just spend it all on drugs anyway. He makes it overwhelmingly evident that this isn't the first bum to ask him for money. And so Kendrick makes the final rejection to the man, claiming that every nickel is his to keep. The homeless man finally stops asking and leaves Kendrick with a final message. He reveals that he is God, and how Kendrick's greed has cost him his spot in heaven. But how much $1 really costs can be interpreted in a different way. It could be asking the question, how much of your spirit will you give up in pursuit of wealth and riches? This question looks on the creator side of the money field. This album has made it clear that the industry has no problem with pimping its black creators, but the industry isn't the only guilty one. To create with the sole purpose of only gaining is to pimp yourself. To pimp yourself out of purpose.
Complexion.
As the title implies, Kendrick speaks on complexion, the complexion of his people. Most black people in America are singled out for their darker complexion. Most harbor feelings of inferiority, feelings of self-hate. Kendrick, alongside a feature from Rhapsody, speaks on our beauty, which is equally beautiful as the rest of the world. The skin color of an individual should never determine their spot in society. No one is better or worse than another person just because of how they look. This song is a celebration of our features, in a world that seems to be so hell-bent on knocking us down.
I'm the biggest hypocrite in 2015
This was, without a doubt, the most difficult song to break down on the album. Kendrick raps over a harsh beat about racism in America, and he's furious. And while you'd expect this fury to be directed towards racists, you wouldn't be completely right, but I'll explain that later. Obviously, Kendrick goes off on racists. He calls out those who've left the black community with an inferiority complex, perpetrating lies that these people will never amount to anything just because of the color of their skin. He calls out the criminals and killers who face little to no punishment for their crimes against innocent black people. He calls out the police, who seem to have a tendency to arrest and kill black people the most. He calls out the system that keeps black neighborhoods impoverished and force some into a life of crime. Towards the end of the song, we see why he keeps repeating, "I'm the biggest hypocrite of 2015. Despite everything he said prior being true, the biggest enemy of the black community is itself. Black people are so blinded that we don't see the damage that we're inflicting on ourselves, thus making us hypocrites." The ending of the track explains this concept perfectly. So why did I weep when Trayvon Marvin was in the street, when gangbanging make me kill blacker than me? Kendrick says that despite being a huge activist towards the betterment of our community, our own idiotic actions of gang violence and murder completely debunk the points that he's trying to make. How can Kendrick fight the enemy of black people when we as a community are our worst enemy?
You ain't got a lie to kick in my neck. You ain't.
A major problem in the black community is that some feel like they have to cover who they really are. Whether it be to impress others or fit in, it typically creates a false version of oneself, and usually a negative one at that. Kendrick says that Momma, who I'm going to assume is directly related to the song Momma, can spot this false persona from a mile away. The gimmick is easy to detect, and it's just better to be yourself. There's no point in making a facade to be with a group of people, for they truly can't be good company if you have to lie to be with them. I would like to believe that all these songs after Momma are meant to represent Kendrick coming to his final sense of home, back to himself. I say this because in these songs he speaks on topics that he's known for. I'd like to think about it like this. Songs prior to Momma wouldn't make sense on his previous albums, while songs in between Momma and I could. I say this because these are concepts that Kendrick has already spoken on, with these tracks being a little bit more precise to align with the theme of the album. I is the climax of Kendrick returning to himself. It's a direct parallel of his status in the track You. Self-love is the main focus, as he realizes he doesn't have control over everything around him. He forgives himself for all the self-beating and the mental torment he inflicted on himself. And now we've reached the final track. In the last few tracks, Kendrick returned home. He returned to Compton. He visited Africa, and most importantly, he came back to himself. But as an artist, where do you go from there? You go back to the people that were with you from the very beginning, your audience. He asks the key question, if things hit the fan, are you still a fan? He wants to know if those who support him truly believe in him to keep going. Kendrick wishes to be the best, to leave a legacy that lasts for generations. But he knows that he's not perfect. He knows that mistakes are bound to happen. He knows he's just a mortal man. At the very end of the song, the poem that set the underlying theme of the album is said in full. But I'd like to look past that for now and come back to it after this section. After the poem is recited, it's revealed that Tupac is the recipient. Tupac is one of Kendrick's greatest inspirations. He looks up to Pac, not only as an artist, but as a person as well. And so they sit down and have a talk. They talk about the rich and poor, their influence, and just the world overall. And then Kendrick recites his final poem. A caterpillar. A very simple creature, a caterpillar is naturally tied down to its immediate surroundings, and they only have one purpose: to consume. To stay alive, the caterpillar is expected to take from the world. But eventually, the caterpillar realizes that it's not the only thing in the world. Specifically, they see the butterfly, and how the world praises it, yet shuns the caterpillar. The butterfly represents all the talent, skill, and beauty deep inside every caterpillar. But the life of the caterpillar isn't easy. It's resentful of the butterfly, seeing it as weak and entitled. The caterpillar believes that the butterfly has no other purpose than to be exploited, to take its talent and make profit off of it with no regard. However, the caterpillar soon realizes its own potential. It begins to create its cocoon, a place that traps it. Unable to see past itself, the caterpillar can now think, to create, to see, to come home. Its wings finally emerge. The caterpillar is no longer tied down and can see life through the lens of the butterfly. The new butterfly can now see situations that their old self would have never considered. New ideas, views, concepts, a whole new life is developed. And with this, despite living a completely different life from the caterpillar, the two begin to realize that they're not so different. They may live different lives, but they still live. They are one and the same. Kendrick tells the story of his career, but more importantly, he tells the story of his life. Even broader, he tells the story of millions. To create is an essential part of mankind, and at some point in everyone's life, some type of creation has been made. Whether it be literature, music, programming, photography, editing, production, building, philosophy, education, or any other field you can think of, this album applies to all of them. Kendrick has lived both sides of the spectrum, to despising the rich and those who have it all, to then aspiring to be the best and obtain these riches, and then to finally making it. Not all people have been on both sides of the fence, but Kendrick has. He's lived as both the caterpillar and the butterfly. And through this complicated and precise poetry, Kendrick only wanted to convey one thing. Despite us being completely different, we are one and the same. I remember you as conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same, abusing my power, full of resentment that turned into a deep depression. Found myself screaming in a hotel room. I didn't want to self-destruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me. So I went running for answers until I came home. But that didn't stop survivor's guilt. Going back and forth trying to convince myself the stripes I earned, or maybe how A1 my foundation was. But while my loved ones was fighting a continuous war back in the city, I was entering a new one. A war that was based on apartheid and discrimination. Made me want to go back to the city and tell my homies what I learned. The word was respect. Just because you wore a different gang color than mine doesn't mean I can't respect you as a black man. Forgetting all the pain and hurt we caused each other in these streets. If I respect you, we unify and stop the enemy from killing us. But I don't know. I'm no mortal man. Maybe I'm just another